So I'll call the meeting to order, Public Safety Building Committee, June 4th, 6:30 p.m. I know Mr. Barry, Mr. Moorhead are not attending, and Mr. Officer's walking in right now. So first item on the agenda is approval meeting minutes for May 7th, 2018. Open it up for any comments before making a motion. Are there any comments?
I've got a comment, although I wasn't here. So John, your minutes were so well written. I wasn't here, I missed the meeting inadvertently, but I really was able to truly understand everything that went on because they're so well written. Seriously, good job.
Bless you. Yeah, great job, John.
Any comments on meeting minutes?
I saw them, they look great.
Okay. The only comment I had, John, was just on it's on furniture and fixtures. Just when I left, just basically saying I left the room, just adding that in. For clarity, I recused myself from the meeting, but no problem. Is there any other comments on that?
It says you returned.
Yeah. So just clarifying that. Pretty small.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented with the one minor edit. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rooney. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? One abstention, Ms. Cook. All right. Next item on the agenda is Vertex's invoice for April services. So April was a pretty light month, as you can probably tell. The total of the invoice was $3,841.25. This was mainly walking us through bid results, vetting the bid specs, etc. I know John and Steve could not be here tonight, but I do expect Paul, who's the clerk of the works, to be here at some point, and we'll make an appropriate introduction then. But are there any questions on the Vertex invoice? Mr. Rooney.
Yeah, I don't know if you can answer this, Jason. There's an outstanding balance. Is that just the check has not been paid yet?
So he gave this to me on the morning of our last meeting, and we hadn't approved this invoice yet. So that has been paid, and we'll see it when we get forward on the project. In general, if I get something in the morning of a meeting, I don't present it to the committee because it doesn't allow for proper vetting. So that has been paid. I know that for a fact.
So the only other question I have, and maybe it's not to you, it's to them, is that it looks like there's $47,000 remaining in their contract.
Yep.
Is that right?
Phase one.
In phase one.
Okay.
And I will take that when we get to the next. No, that's a fair question because I asked the same question.
Okay.
So
I did too. I knew that's what it was, but I couldn't see.
So are there any questions on the invoice other than what Mr. Rooney spoke to?
So this is a pro forma approval, we've already paid it.
No, we have not paid the $3,841. He was asking, they put their AR down at the bottom of the invoice.
Sorry, okay.
So he was asking about that one.
Okay.
So the item on the table that I'll make a motion to approve payment for is for $3,841.25 for April services. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Mr. Goodney. Is there any further discussion on that one? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, so then I had a placeholder on our agenda for Vertex's invoice for May. I got it this morning, so I do not present it to you. But included in it is an addendum for basically construction administration. So to flash back to when we originally negotiated the contract, which was Mr. Rooney and Ms. Cook, it's a time and materials contract. We agreed on what it would take to get us to basically start a construction, which is where we're at. And then we knew what we were signing up for after the fact. We locked in an hourly rate. We knew approximately how many hours a week it was, et cetera, et cetera. There is now an addendum that was brought forward. I will present it to the committee and we can take action on it at the next meeting. The one thing that I would like to, I think, vet as part of this discussion in terms of their May services is you know, we do have the quote unquote, I'll call it, I believe it to be true savings from the first part of the project. They're viewing that as just something that carries forward to construction administration. With the committee's blessing, my suggestion would be that they write the amendment in such a way that that savings drops to the bottom line. We go with what we originally agreed to for hours for construction administration. And if we run into an issue on the back end, we run into an issue on the back end. But I'm not sure, I personally am willing to just allow that to drift.
Feels a little slushy maybe?
I don't know that we need any motion, but just, I'd rather present an amendment that we can approve at the next meeting without having to go back and forth, because otherwise we're gonna have to call a meeting in the meantime.
So, I'm not quite sure what you're proposing. Are you saying, so is invoice that they gave today for May,
Yep.
are they saying that's part of phase 1 or part of the construction?
Based on my very cursory review, it would have been more for the second phase construction administration. We had a contract before May 1st.
Right.
So it's getting everything teed up. They've been having status meetings with the design team, et cetera. So I would view we were done with what you and John had negotiated no later than the end of April, probably soon.
Okay, so you're saying that the 82 is that?
I'd say the 82 is phase 1, which means that we came in under budget of $47,000.
$50 82. So 82, with 129 being budgeted, so you're saying that 47 should now be looked at as a savings,
Correct.
right? And then we start all over again with the next phase.
Correct. And if we have a budget problem on the back end, we'll deal with it then. It's going to be because the contract gets extended, so we're going to be getting income from the GC. Theoretically, it's their issue. Obviously, if it's our issue, we're going to be on the hook. Jeff's probably going to be asking us for more too, right? If it goes beyond the July 1st of next year. But
So the next phase is, again, it's hours and billing and hourly rate,
Mhm.
that's it. So there's no cap on it at all.
there would be a cap in the addendum.
So
for
there
what
is
they
going to be a
purchase.
cap on the next phase.
Mhm. What I'm proposing is that the cap be what we originally signed up for phase 2, not the savings from phase 1 plus what we signed up for phase 2.
Well, that's a good way to do it.
I'm thinking logically. I mean, that's what I was going to propose.
So they've agreed to the cap on the next phase?
Well, it's time and materials not to exceed is how I would put it, as opposed to Jeff as a fixed fee.
Right. Okay, so really, it's not fixed. It is. Okay, so I'm with you. So no, I think it's a really good idea.
Okay, so I will have them draft their addendum in such a way that it conforms to that, so that hopefully it requires little discussion next time.
But what you're accomplishing is, they don't get to look at that 47 as something they can spend in the next phase. That's what
Correct.
you're going to accomplish.
Correct. That's how I'm looking at it. So I'm seeing a lot of head nods. Did anyone disagree with the direction?
No.
No, I don't know what it means as a matter of contract, but as a way of thinking about it, I think it's the right way to go.
All we're talking, yeah, so.
I don't mean to make things any.
No, all I would say is all we're doing is basically telling them how much they have to spend.
Yep.
And in my sense is that savings goes back to the owner, not necessarily to the vendor.
So we're treating it as two contracts, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
So we
resetting
don't
it
the
at
first one,
zero.
they don't get to
Mhm.
take that into the second one.
Correct.
That's what we're saying.
That's how we
Yep.
talked about at the beginning, is that was 2 contracts. Correct?
That was the rationale.
So they essentially left $47,000 on the table.
Oh, I don't like to think of it that way, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right, they were more efficient than they
Right.
thought they were gonna be.
But remember,
Or
we
the
were
town,
concerned.
or I would argue the town did a lot of heavy lifting
Beforehand.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
during.
You didn't need as much of their services.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it doesn't mean a repeat, but, you know, money.
Okay. All right, so that's from May, so you can expect a copy of the addendum in the May invoice well in advance of the next meeting. The next item before we go to Vertex had 2 letters for the month is I did have on the originally posted agenda a general contractor approval. expecting that CTA might have a bill for us. They chose not to bill anything for the current month. So when we get to that next month, I'm going to break that out as kind of a third agenda item. So we'll have Vertex, everyone else, and then general contractor, just for formatting going forward. So other vendor invoices per Vertex's recommendation. It's broken up into two components. One are invoices received this month. They relate to PARI for the water main, Fuss and O'Neill for stormwater management, and Context for construction administration. Total amount is $41,275 across those three vendors. I just have one question. It's actually for you, Jeff. It's not actually on the invoice, but it's about more your progress to completion. Amendment 2, which was the clubhouse. I had asked John, he wasn't able to answer it. You have a fee of that to be agreed to of $22,000. You billed 11. Do you expect during construction? So basically, part of that 22 was
Construction administration services.
Okay.
We didn't bill for it yet.
okay. Any questions on the three invoices? Okay, I'll move that we approve the Vertex recommendation of $41,275 to the three vendors noted in the letter and included in the packet. Is there a second? Mr. Goodney, seconded. Any further discussion?
One more question. So, not to put you on the spot, but I guess
I'm
you
here.
want to. So at this point, do you feel comfortable that the fixed fee that we agreed to is going to hold all the way through?
Yeah, no, the way we structured our invoices, we've taken the fee for construction administration and broken it down over the number of months of the contract with the contractor, so that you have us for every month that you have the contractor for. If something unforeseen should happen and the contractor gets allowed to have more time, then we would probably be looking for an extension of our services as well, probably at a similar monthly rate.
So if we're done by July 1st of 19, we're good with you?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, if nothing changes, we're good.
Okay.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Is there any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next one is more procedural in nature. The town went out and got the bond, correct me if I got this wrong, but the premium policy for the actual building construction.
Builder's risk insurance, yes.
So basically between now and actual taking occupancy of the building, if something were to happen, this is the policy that covers it. So they went out.
Cover the whole time or just the first year?
That covers the whole period of
Construction.
of construction. Yeah.
So you went through Cabot risk strategies, it looks like, which is who you normally go through for these things. And they had to get it basically paid before CTA could be on the books on May 1st. So this, in full transparency, this was paid, but there really wasn't an option of whether we could incur the expense or not. So it's $11,214. If anyone has any questions on the process, I'll defer to Mr. Purple. But it seems like kind of
Actually, an excellent rate. I do a lot of builder's risk for really high-end houses and see a lot more than this for something that's a fraction of that. So it looks like
Yeah,
you did a good job.
Yeah, they did. Well, I'll defer to our insurance company. So we use Maya, which again I think they get the bang for the scope because they deal with so many Massachusetts communities. They went out to 5 companies. They got 3 bids back. This was actually the lowest, which in their opinion provided the best level of coverage. Sometimes it works out that you get the best level of coverage with the lowest price, and so they recommended that we go with them. I talked to John Revere before we started the process, and he said you can have CTA do it, but CTA is going to charge the price plus their markup. And I said, we'll take care of it. I don't want to pay a markup if we don't have to.
So the actual underlying property insurance that's going to increase as time goes on as the property value increases.
Correct.
Whose budget is that in?
That's going to be in our budget.
The town budget.
Mhm.
So it's not in this budget.
Correct.
but this is.
Right.
So I'm not sure why this is and that's not, but. I'm
So we'll
going-
see what the difference looks like, you know, with what we're, you know, obviously we're paying for this building, we're paying for that building, and we're paying for Fayetteville Hall right now, which should be off the books, in some way, shape, or form by the time we do the public safety. So it's gonna be a 3-for-1. I know it's not gonna be an even swap,
No, not even
but, you know, I don't think it's gonna be as big as, you know.
So you think it's in the budget, that you actually have?
Yeah, I don't know if it's in the budget, but I
I'm
think
not
it's,
sure it's either,
I
but
think,
look
I
at
think
the
we're in the
difference.
ballpark, how's that? I don't think it's gonna be a huge increase.
Okay. But I don't think it's in there either if you look at the difference year over year, but.
Yeah.
Just so I'm clear, you guys are talking about when the building's done and it goes
Correct.
online and it's insured as a public
Exactly,
building.
so when
to the
we,
town of
so
Berlin.
Kathy
This-
referred, right.
Yes. We will be gone
Right,
at that point.
so I would correct that to Karen.
For purposes of this
Thank you.
item on the agenda, that's correct.
Okay.
So I will make a motion to approve this subject to the Vertex recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chairman's update, very brief tonight. I received notice that the building inspector had actually issued the formal building permit last week for the project to CTA, which seems like, for any of us that have pulled a building permit for our house, seems like a very seamless process just to get the building permit issued. But I think any of you that were party to all of the regulatory reviews, there were a lot of conditions that had to be met just for that permit to be issued. So I think that's a very important milestone in the project, and I think you know, speaks wonders to the collaboration that continues to occur. So I think that was a nice milestone to be informed of. And then our favorite topic, the solar canopies. I think we finally have progress there that is worth formally reporting. So it is my understanding as of this morning from John Lemieux that he has been coordinating with town council. This is the first time town council has actually gone out with an RFP related to solar. But Grafton recently did something very similar, so he's been coordinating using his resources, et cetera. It's just a different procurement process than what they typically have to undergo in the town. So it's my expectation that within about 2 weeks they will be delivering something to Mark to go out to the street, so that by the time the next meeting occurs, like, there should be actually a formal process underway or complete. I'm not sure the exact timeline they put around it, but I think, you know, my recommendation to him was that he should coordinate, given that we have approved that approach and the Board of Selectmen took a motion to direct the town administrator in that team to go out and get an RFP. I think our work is complete on that, other than to make sure they actually get these canopies on the site, because that was obviously the overall intention. So, I said this last meeting, I said I didn't actually have it as an agenda topic. It's now slid under the chairman's update, so I think we're making the right progress finally around that.
And is the RFP only for the canopies? It's not for any other building in town, no schools, no anything?
Correct. So definitely something to consider whether that, but that's how they're going now, to make sure that, especially given steel tariffs, even with all the tax savings, that nothing changes in the programs that these companies are offering. Given that our owner's project manager is not here, I did have a discussion with him this morning just to understand where they're at, and feel free to chime in on, especially because, and John too, on the construction progress meetings, but my understanding is, in general, there's not a lot of activity down at the site yet. That is going to very quickly change. What they've been doing is going through a lot of their procurement process of actually getting the materials, and it's my understanding that this week you'll start to maybe see some trees coming down. So that really will start the process, and I think you'll start to see quickly the progress there. There has been no communication of anything that's off the timeline. Remember, they have a very strict August 15th deadline to complete phase 1. They're shooting to do that much quicker, is my understanding, and that will put the golf community on on par, no pun intended, to be in their new facilities, I'll say sooner than what was promised, and we'll kind of get that part out of the way and allow kind of public safety to then do what they need to do. Somewhat correlated to that was there was a golf committee meeting in May, and Steve Theron went on behalf of public safety to really help and hash through what the golf committee had concerns about in terms of phasing, limitations of course play. Basically, they had come up with a list of things, and there was basically a bunch of items that were easily resolved, to that committee's satisfaction. So then we were able to go in front of the selectmen the next night and basically say, golf committee's on board, golf management company's on board, you need to actually approve this. That was a condition to get the building permit, believe it or not, from planning. So all of that kind of came together rather seamlessly, and I just wanted to thank Mark. Mark actually went down and met with the superintendent one, I think it was a Friday or something, and he basically outlined all of we basically helped kind of, I'll call it project manage and get everything kind of lined up so that it was very easy to see these are their concerns for the next 30 to 45 days, and here are their concerns longer term to make this, I'll call it, not an issue. So, and I know, John, you have been attending the weekly construction progress meetings. Anything to add from those that
No, nothing.
warrant discussion here?
No, nothing, just like I was saying, they're waiting for the golf committee to get the architect on board. It's pretty much the only thing that's pending.
So where does the golf course stand right now? I'm sorry, I don't even know. Is it open?
It's open.
Yep.
Okay, and there's no plan for it to close at all?
No.
Okay, good job.
Which is important for the leagues, because you don't want to lose the leagues.
Yeah, and I
I'd say
think-
that has been the majority of our construction meetings is talking about golf-related items, because obviously, good reason, that's the first piece, that's the first hurdle, is to make sure the logistics are all sorted through, the contractor understands what they have to do to get them up and running temporarily while they move the house and keep the golfers out of the way, and what's gonna happen when the house is placed on a new foundation. So a lot of those issues are what's consuming most of the time of everybody.
Who's the one person that's really coordinating those? Mark?
That's the way it's been.
Thus far.
Thus far. So, Jason's right. So just to make sure that this continuity plan for golf, to be able to make sure that the selectmen, would stay in compliance with the agreement we have with the management company, that they can continue to play and continue to operate effectively, during the construction period. That was important to make sure we had that all laid out so the selectmen could approve the continuity plan, so it would satisfy the planning board's condition, so the building permit could get issued. I've been in contact with golf management. We'll see them again tomorrow morning, making sure that they're all set, that they're on board with everything that we're doing, and they are. They feel comfortable that any of these changes that are being made with regards to the trailer, to the temporary storage of the canopies, to the temporary service for plugging in the carts and bringing them under cover. I think CTA was pretty helpful. We're sitting here, talking for 10 minutes about, we're building a structure, what kind of structure, the liability, and
Grand plans.
finally,
CTA was more than-
CTA speaks up and says, well, why don't we, look, we're just gonna bring in some
Conex.
temporary Conex boxes, this lunch by 50 feet, 2 of them, we can fit it, done. We're talking 3 months. So I think we've got a plan in place which satisfies everybody, which takes care of everything. And now it's just a matter of getting the construction trailers down there and the temporary trailers, and then they can start doing, really seeing some progress.
That's great.
Anything to add from your perspective at those meetings?
Meetings? No, that is pretty much what I've said. There's a lot of just pro forma that we are getting out of the way, but most of the real discussion about project-related items has to do with golf and
Any
initial
public
work
safety
stuff.
related concerns?
There's little stuff that we've been talking about, just little things that need to get sort of squared away, but I don't see anything difficult at this point.
Okay. Any other questions related to project manager? John?
Yeah, obviously, scheduling is difficult, and people miss meetings based upon unavoidable conflicts, but we've now set the meetings for the first Monday of each month. It would be helpful to have a representative of the owner's project management at our meetings. I assume something came up which allowed none of them to appear tonight.
Well, I was expecting our clerk of the works to be
Yeah.
quite candid, but that message was pretty sternly delivered this morning.
Okay, great, thank you, Jason.
Yeah. We skated it, there's a reason, so if Mondays aren't gonna work, right, it's just like
Right.
if, let's just say you had to travel every
Right.
Monday going forward, I would expect you to raise your hand and
Right.
say, is the committee amenable to another night? May or may not be, but, yeah, no, I get it.
So do we expect Steve Theron to be more involved at this point, now that we have gotten into construction?
Well, they have a clerk.
Yeah, but I always thought Steve was gonna be more involved than he was in the first place. I mean, it was more John Levine than Steve Theron. Steve Theron lives in Southborough.
That's how it's been advertised. I still get calls from John. I don't get calls from Steve, other than on the one golf issue that was raised. So I do think that I, as the chair, probably need to sit down with them one more time to make sure we're all on the same page for this critical phase we're going through.
I think John's handling more behind the scenes. You get the phone calls and the admin pieces, but Steve, you're getting more FaceTime. I don't know if you agree, but I don't see John very much. I see emails, maybe the occasional phone call, but the FaceTime has been with Steve, and obviously.
So Steve's been coming to the construction meetings.
Correct, and the clerk, so that's really the faces that we're gonna see. I haven't seen John in a while.
Anything else on owner's project manager other than delivering Mr. Rooney's message? So the clerk was also supposed to bring 11 by 17 pieces of paper, which is why I told Mark it was okay to print on 8.5 by 11. There isn't a lot that went on with the budget over the last month because, as you know, we didn't really approve that much in terms of invoices. What I would ask the committee, and I'm happy to do it now or at the next meeting, but to the extent that you do not like anything in the presentation of the format of how they're doing it, right? So just to rehash for especially those that have maybe missed one of the recent meetings, the cover page is meant to kind of track where we're at. I view the bottom two lines, line 27 and 28, as the most important. Remember at our last meeting, we asked them to break out between construction contingency, which is what the town agreed to, and bid savings, which is kind of, I'll call it the icing on the cake that no one has any intention of touching. So we will see items going in and out of line 27. If we ever see something going in out of line 28 other than in the positive direction, I think we're all going to be having a little bit of heartburn. So what on page 3 John has now done is anytime he touches that contingency, so you'll see that we've used 11,000 of the contingency, there's detail of everything, right? So that you could then track back what that construction contingency was, why it changed, and especially Kathy, this is probably going to be the most important for you in your advisory role, walking someone through why we're using contingency or not, right? And that will fluctuate probably down, right, over time, but hopefully there will be some positives that we find to offset it.
So this is just format, so this is really kind of form of substance. Why are we not including the bid savings as contingency? Why are we separating that out?
That was a decision the committee made at the last meeting, really because we view construction contingency as much as we don't want to spend it, it's inevitable we're going to have to spend some of it, versus bid savings, we don't think anyone should ever touch that.
Okay.
Was
I like
kind of the
that.
rationale behind that.
I offered it up as a suggestion. I'd seen other communities do something similar where they really wanted a distinction made about this is money that they are really, really intending to return, or essentially not borrow. And therefore, there should be a big red flag thrown up, as Jason said, if you were ever to have to draw into that. So having it as a separate line item makes that point very clear.
I like it, so it's good.
Jason, is there a way, for someone that is not all that familiar with these construction sheets, is there a way that Vertex could highlight the changes between our meetings? Because what I've been doing is that I've been getting, I got this June 4th spreadsheet, then I went back to the last spreadsheet I had before to see where it changed.
Yeah.
Is there a way for them just to highlight the
Yes.
changes in the numbers in between our meetings so
It
that?
shouldn't have changed.
Yes.
But yeah, yes,
All right.
I think we would theoretically have had to make a motion, I would think, to procure something at a meeting before to change that result. And obviously if it's printed in color, you'll be able to see what the colors
Yeah.
mean. Yeah,
Thanks.
okay,
Would be expended, right?
yeah.
And why in column D are we going to include the 363? I know it's a project, but it's being funded separately.
The 353, the
363.
FF&E?
No,
Oh.
it's the 363 for the golf course, basically.
That's actually a really good question. So CTA views this as one project. So they're gonna issue one bill to the town, they have one, and we are gonna receive that bill. So there's a little bit of administration that's gonna have to occur, but I've tried to be in front of it. So alternative one, remember, is, so my intention is at the next meeting, we will have a, it's an AIA, right? That's gonna be
It's an
presented.
application for payment, yeah.
So, the application for payment will come forward. It'll include public safety, which will be on everything lines 1 through 27. Then it will have alternative one, which is the CPC article for roads, the parking and retaining wall. And then it'll have alternative 2, which is basically the golf clubhouse, which is a separate debt funded article at town meeting. So we're gonna approve all of that.
And it'll all be mixed up. You won't be able to say, this line item is golf, that line item is the road. It's all gonna
So
be
that's-
in amongst the various line items in the bill.
But that's where our project manager is going to have to summarize that down below, because remember what my next step is. So we approve it. I then have to go to CPC, and I've worked with Freddie to get a process in place so that they don't hinder payment, or like their timing of meetings or representatives don't hinder, the payment that the town is obligated to make under a contract. They have to approve that it's within the scope of the project, etc. They have a normal checklist they have to go through. And then separately, the golf clubhouse, I'm not sure the golf committee needs to approve those invoices, but I would assume Mr. Kirk will come up with some sort of procedure around
I
what needs
think
to be done
Lou's
to come
already
out of that.
started to, he's reached out to Freddie the same way that you did.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the debt funded article, not the CPC.
Oh, right, yes.
So then
That's easier.
yeah, so then separately, the town accountant sends a report to John, and I've asked him to make sure that it ties into his spreadsheet, so that like if we ever went to Heidi and said, what does the records show for the town, it actually ties. Heidi's records currently show the total town meeting authorization, which is the 27+ million.
Mhm.
So if you actually look at her accounting records, it shows the payments to St. Mark's, the payments for attorneys, et cetera. So I believe she's back from vacation
Wednesday.
So I have a note out to her to try to figure out a way that her system can track it so that we can tie in here, because there's going to be what I'll call cross charges. So we may pay CTA out of our budget for about a minute, and then CPC is going to have to transfer in. So there's going to be a lot of, I'll call it, moving pieces. That's why we've kind of lined it up in such a way that there's a lot of people looking over this to make sure it's coming out of the right funding source.
Well, she's got, 2 separate warrant articles she's got to account against. That's how she does this, right? So she's got the original one, and she's got the new one, the 214. And then they've got to account for the CPC funds. So she's really got 3 places to go to post payments against. So you're right, it's gonna have to.
And even within the 2017 special town meeting, 27 million, You've got we have 22.6 of that, right, in theory. We all know the St. Mark's Lane deal was greater than,
Right, but
So-
it should be absolutely part of the whole.
right, so it's just coming up with a way that John isn't deciding what goes against public safety versus St. Mark's, like, that the town accountant that knows all the various authorizations is coordinated in there.
Okay, so, and you probably already said this, who is gonna be the person that makes sure Heidi knows which article to post the payments against?
I think it's a coordination of, John's gotta extract it from this payment thing. We then need to approve and understand that. The CPC needs to approve their piece. And then usually what happens after this meeting, any invoices, I have to then send documentation to Heidi and Carol at the townhouse, and then they pay it and make sure, and then when I get the sheet the next month, I make sure it ends up, but like, I'm only one person, so I think
But I would
that's.
think as part of what you send back to them, whatever the payment is, you'd say this goes to article whatever, this goes to article
Yes.
whatever, this goes to CPC.
We only have one article so far, but yes, going forward, that's what we're gonna have to do.
Do we have the authority to authorize any payment to those articles? I don't believe we do.
We just have to authorize what comes before us, and then Mark has to, CPC then
They
has
have the authority.
they're gonna transfer the money into our account to reimburse us, essentially is what's gonna happen.
Okay.
And
So it's
then,
like a shell game.
Yes,
But at town meeting, they can really,
That's the words you
they're the
need to
only
hear.
ones that can approve spending that money because it was their article.
CPC, the CPC piece,
Both
yes.
articles were both different.
Well, the other one's just like ours,
Right.
it was Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
So I think
It's all
our.
approved, it's all approved, so she's just waiting for
Yeah.
payments to
Yeah.
be made, no.
So I just think being skeptical and curious is actually an okay thing in my opinion on these going forward, just because, just making sure that everything gets in the right bucket. And I said at our last meeting, I'm posting these every month, so if townspeople are very interested, there's no doubt in where the money is going that they've authorized, at least related to this project. Mr. Rooney.
Is there, Jeff, you mentioned that the descriptions are going to be commingled from the general contractor. You're not going to be able to identify which is the alternative and which is the main. Is there a way that they could do that for us? Because I can envision some, additional gray hairs or losing of hair trying to figure that out.
Well, there is a way to do that, and simplified it, but the precise answer is that each trade in the construction project is required to break down
Right.
their request for payment within this master request that the GC will provide. And usually we use $25,000 as the threshold. Anything greater than that, break it down into smaller bits so we can understand it, because we pay on a percentage complete. So work that's complete, we'll pay for that only as a percentage of your total contract value. And so that breakdown will actually give us enough granular detail
Okay.
to assemble that information into the right pieces.
Okay, good.
So yes, it's going to be there. It's just taking somebody, lifting that information off the sheet and filtering it into the right box.
And who's going to do that? You or?
Vertex.
Vertex, okay. Who's not here tonight? Okay, they know they're going to do that, right?
That is my understanding.
Get paid.
And then page 2 is basically a listing of everything that the town has paid that we tie into column E on the front page, which is the expended column. The one recommendation I did give to John, but I gave him a pass on getting it to us today, is having them actually tied to the descriptions on the front page. So like, for example, 1 through 7 are construction, so like we should just label 1 through, like in the head, it's very, just so you can kind of tie back. So the way I came upon that is like planning and bid set is not an actual separate line item. So I want to know where that is on the front sheet. So I've already made that recommendation. If there's any other recommendations that you have along that, I'm happy to relay them. Your question?
Just an observation. Might make things go more smoothly if you ask the CPC to have a representative here when you're approving payments, That way it doesn't come as a surprise and they can say, well, we were here when it was discussed and when things were approved.
So
Rather than you having to go and carry
they're
water.
appointing a representative that can approve it on behalf of CPC. So that's already,
Great.
so it might actually save them coming here.
I thought of that same thing. I
Yeah.
got them in a group meeting.
Yeah, no, they don't need to call a
Yeah.
separate meeting because they couldn't really agree within the first 15 days to have a meeting every month. It's just not the cadence there. So is there any other comments, questions on this? All right. If you think of anything after, we can certainly get them to John and team.
Are you still asking for questions about the budget itself or the process? Because I've got a question on a couple of line items.
You can, yeah, because I'm moving on from that item. Yes, so
So
go ahead,
this
Kathy.
may be, again, this is a meeting, I'm really sorry, but the combination of security and CCTV, radio and dispatch equipment, computer, network, and phone is a lot of money. It just looks too high to me, as far as what I would think would be needed, especially for the telephone system and for the computer system. But the one that surprised me is where did security and CCTV actually, why was it zero to begin with?
So,
We have this one number now, we've broken it out into the various things. I just don't remember where the 368 came in separately.
correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this has been the biggest domino, or it's been juggling around through how Jeff had it presented at town meeting, and then how it then ended up in the budgets for the construction documents. And then it is very clear that when they went out to bid, it on purpose was not included in the general contractor's bid, but it was included in the actual budget, in the estimate. So they really had to break it out so that you could see it, because there's going to be a separate vendor that we're going to have to procure with on that.
Yeah, John is gonna be submitting invoices on behalf of the town for those items, so you have to have something to bill against it. So it definitely has to be shown as a line item on the budget, it's a soft cost item, and Jason's absolutely right. This item flip-flopped a bunch of times between the committee, the town deciding whether the GC was gonna do the work, or the town was gonna procure vendors to do the work, and ultimately, that's the route we went. Town was going to procure vendors. What didn't happen is that the estimate for those funds was still encumbered within the GC's cost estimate, which we had prior to actually having a GC, and it never got broken out on the budget as that separate line item until after the bids came in. And so that's why it shows up as a zero before, because it was up in the number above.
Okay, perfect sense, got it. So is the technology committee going to be involved in all of this, or just a piece of this? Do we
So
know?
they, I had a conversation with them while we were out to bid. They're holding their own meetings, and they will be coming back to us to try to, if they have any recommendations. A lot of their line of questioning was where the fiber lines are going in the road, whether it's crossing, whether it's not, how it ties into the senior center, backup, contingency plan. So they've been informed. They have plans, and so they've been informed that they can ask any questions at any time, but that we have a path that we're going down. If they have any objections, they should let us know sooner rather than later.
But they're not technically responsible for this. They just know that they should at least look at it. I mean, they haven't taken charge of this as far as
No, I
designing
mean,
it and.
My recommendation would be when we get to line 19, which is computer equipment and network, that I know Tom has been coming to your meetings, who's the IT director, but that there be some consult on that spend. But unless I'm missing something, security and CCTV, that's probably not. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, all these line items that have to do with technology and computers end up sort of commingled, because they all run back to the same server room. They're all in the same racks, and it's like it's one device and the next device, and they're all separate lines on the budget, just the devices that happen to be in the same rack. So certain types of decisions, like a real stupid silly one is, you know, what color cabling are we gonna use for this type of communication versus that type of communications for the patch cables that are on the back? Somebody's gotta pick those colors. Well, we might, at the time that we get the submittal for that, ask the chiefs or the IT people, whoever in town to help us make the decision on that, and then that's when they get involved with something like that. Well, okay, we'd like to have blue, or no, we'd yellow for that. It's admittedly, it's kind of a silly thing, but that's at some point the decision making that needs to happen. In terms of the vendors that are going to be submitting actual pieces of equipment, my understanding is that all of that has already been done, and so.
But nothing's been,
Nothing's been bought.
Nothing's bought, so that would have to
We've already
come
kind of
forward.
selected what we wanted to get for security, communications, all these sort of line items, and now it's just going and getting it. So the details will be, you know, how does it exactly get implemented, and then they may have some feedback on that. I don't know.
I think that the details you'll certainly get from Tom and company. The MTC itself is focused more on strategy and how do the pieces play together and how does this structure play with the rest of the town. Unfortunately, all the decisions that went into the bid were made before we got the appointments to the technology committee. And it held its, I think it was third meeting this afternoon. And public safety building was a topic of conversation. But they're still getting themselves going. You know, I do not expect them to, except by mistake, get into the details of what color cables or where the windows get positioned. If they do, I'll slap them.
Yeah. Kathy, anything else?
No, I'm still concerned that there's not someone coordinating this whole thing and making sure we're being smart about this, and where there is some interplay. Like, you know, I was pretty obsessed with trying to get the DPW radios part of that, and then they still got a separate article approved at town meeting. So I'm just hoping that we know what we're doing with this piece of it.
Well, I think that's part, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the responsibilities of Vertex, to keep the oversight, the 30,000-foot view, so that everything is being coordinated. I'm not convinced that that has been happening or has happened yet, but I'm waiting to see it happen.
That just doesn't seem to be one of their principal expertises the times we talk to them as far as this specific goes.
Well, the way it sort of unfolds is that we had one of these giant meetings a while back with public safety personnel, IT. We actually had one of the vendors here at one point, and the engineers working with our team. And of course, we don't necessarily design those systems, but we assist and help with the infrastructure that has to supply those systems. And that's when those critical decision-making processes started. And so that got the town's public safety personnel off and running on looking at various systems that they want for their buildings. And public safety is a little different animal in the sense that they need them to do very specific jobs. And so after a while of, I don't know, looking out into the field, what's out there, they came up with, narrowed the field of choices down, and then started looking specifically at a group of vendors. And I'm pretty sure you guys vetted them out pretty good as far as radio, communications, security, that sort of thing. And then Vertex got some initial pricing back from that. And so we helped along the way, Vertex helped along the way, and the town's IT helped along the way. So there isn't really one entity that's overseeing it and pushing it all through, because they have the expertise. There's various people that supply different information at various points, and because we're still in charge of various aspects as well. But Vertex is doing a piece, the department's doing a piece, and town IT has a little piece of it as well. So that's sort of the name of the game in construction projects, from what I've seen, is everybody has a little piece, and you have to kind of rely on that teamwork to get to the finish line.
So Kathy, would it be helpful if we have an agenda item specific to this, that someone can articulate how the pieces are coming together and generally what the plans are without going through where each key fob is in a building? Actually, Mark, you might have to, it might be executive session because of the security of a public safety building, but if that would be helpful, I can talk to the chiefs and try to get
I
something.
think that would be helpful. We've had instances in the past that involve no one in this room where the process of procuring new equipment was not done correctly. It was picked by people who didn't have the expertise to pick it, and almost made a really, really bad decision until someone came in and said, that's not what they should do. And it got stopped, but it almost happened. So I think that would be helpful.
So just for a little bit more on the MTC, they do have people assigned to keep track of what's going on with the public safety building. They did dig through the documentation sort of just before town meeting to try and get a feel for what's going on. In an ideal world, you know, if what you've talked about is 30,000 foot level, they have the 50,000 foot level of making sure that all that fits together. And certainly if there's anything specific, you know, I've attended all their meetings, and you know, they're trying to figure out how best to contribute. I think none of the people there has served on a town committee before. They're all enthusiastic, but they're also finding their way. So don't be shy about, you know, going after them as well.
I'd be willing to help out too, because I was involved in all my IT stuff.
And it isn't, by no means, what I said before, I mean that we're done. Like, we've done it, we're gonna buy it from some vendors and then rely on them to install it and be perfect. I mean, John, you can speak to it too, but it's a continuous process throughout
Yeah.
the entire project.
And one of the things we had in our contract, we wanted to make sure we weren't buying end-of-life equipment. Something that 2 years from now, there was no parts for, we're gonna be a bad one.
All right.
All right, so I will take that as an action item. Anything else in the budget and the process around that? I just expect the numbers are gonna be a lot bigger starting next month, so that was good use of time.
If you could get the budget a couple days before the meeting would be nice.
Yes. You're feeling my pain at about 10 a.m. this morning.
Yeah, I emailed you.
Yeah. So I am going to ask for everything by Wednesday before a Monday meeting. The only thing I can't speak to is exactly when CTA.
We have our meetings Tuesday morning, the way it's set up. The Tuesday morning meeting involves, the previous Tuesday morning meeting would involve getting a draft application, which we would mark up on site with the contractor. So correct anything we think needs to be adjusted. They get that copy back, they can make their final edits. They get us by the next Tuesday morning meeting a notarized hard copy, and that's essentially signed at the meeting and delivered to the town. So you would have it Tuesday before your Monday meeting.
So let me just play this out, and July might not be the best example. So our meeting would be on a Monday, July 9th. So theoretically, the construction progress meeting that's happening would be on Tuesday, July 3rd.
Third, Bill, I'll be hard at work. We may be on vacation, but we'll be there.
All right.
No, we'll.
So the
we should
draft-
have we should have the full application on the 3rd. The draft would be 1 week prior to that.
Okay, so then let me go forward to August, which is a normal month where we meet on the first Monday. They would have a draft on July 24th,
Yeah.
and then a final on July 31st, and then we would approve it 5 days later.
Yeah.
That actually sounds like a process that actually may work.
That's the same process we use on all our jobs. Now,
All right.
whether or not we get the draft a full week ahead of time, or they're giving us to it a couple of days ahead of time,
Well, that's
that's
you
our
guys.
business. But you would always have it the week
Okay.
before.
All right. So, all right, I think we got a
They want to
process.
get paid.
Yep, I think, yeah.
Just because as the numbers get bigger, we really need to look at them closer.
Items requiring procurement. If Vertex was here, they would say they are ready to get going on radio procurements. I pushed them pretty hard because they are stuck on the fact that steel is the only thing with tariffs. I think almost everything these days is subject to potential tariffs depending on where it comes from and what day of the week it is. So obviously the quicker we lock into some of these things, the better off we are from a budgetary perspective. I went back to our meeting minutes. It was in February where we had last talked about radios, where John Lemieux had provided us with a presentation, and he had kind of outlined recommendations based on discussions with the chief, and they had also hired a third-party consultant that actually, right to Kathy's point on the last item, someone that actually knows what they're talking about on radios, with no deference to the chiefs, right? Just the outside opinion, just to make sure that we're all thinking about this the right way. So I don't have like a proposal or anything in front of me, but I guess I have always viewed radios as an item that if we weren't building a new building, the chiefs would be making their pitch to town meeting and would have come up with their proposal and put it forward on a warrant article, and there would have been no committee vetting it other than just the standard Board of Selectmen putting it on the warrant and advisory vetting the numbers. So I'm looking and open to suggestions of how we want to proceed on this item. Do we approve an item not to exceed a certain amount? Do we want a detailed presentation? I don't want to speak for anyone here, but I'm not sure we have any radio experts sitting here. So I'm just trying to give Vertex some direction of how we want to proceed as a committee. And they're open to doing, giving you item by item descriptions, which would have to be obviously at the next meeting, or if we want to authorize them to proceed on certain items, we could certainly do that too. And this one's a little different than everything else we're doing because this is something that, they will be going before the town again during the life of this building to deal with. Go ahead.
My preference is to rely on the chiefs and the independent expert rather than going through a presentation in front of us. That would be my preference.
Me too, as long as the consultant agrees.
Yeah.
We're not buying stuff we don't need.
So we're only talking about line 20 now, right?
Yes, that's correct.
345. So I thought that the decision already been made as to what to buy when we had the choice. So that's done, right? As far as what.
My recollection of that presentation that John made was that they had a recommendation as to which way to go, and that there was a little more vetting that had to been done on those pieces of equipment and some of the pricing that they were getting. But that was the direction that collectively they all wanted to head.
I guess Chief, do you feel like you guys have you have a strong view on which direction you're going in terms of
Jeff
consistency?
pretty much summed it up. It's just a matter of, because they can't order the radio equipment probably for another 6 months or so it's going to be dependent on what the pricing is at that time.
So why does John think that he can order it now?
There's certain things you can order, the radio specifically, probably not.
The radios by meaning in dispatch,
Yeah.
portables?
No, not just the equipment,
Just the equipment.
radio equipment in the dispatch itself, which would be in the server room.
Okay.
So I agree with Mr. Mooney. I don't want to hear the details because they don't mean anything to me, right?
Mhm.
But what I do want to know, what I really want everybody to understand is we can't go back to town meeting in 2 years and ask for this again. So this has really got to last for as long as it possibly reasonably can. And so I just want assurance that we do have what John Lyon said, which is something that really is state of the art, that's expected to last for whatever reason is it. I would hope 10 years, but at least 7 years, so that we really don't expect. Because I was at a meeting one time, one day, where someone in this room said something like, "Well, we'll just go to town meeting and get it again in a couple years." I said, no, we've got to get it right this time and make sure it's going to last and not have to replace it in a couple years because we made a bad decision. So I just want to know we made that good decision, and I don't know how to get to that point. In that we've got good warranties, we understand, everything we can, so we really have something that is very functional, and it's going to last as long as it reasonably could.
Okay.
So I think I can answer your question to that is when he did talk to the vendor who we were going to use, that was part of the discussion to make sure we didn't have, to John's point, end of life equipment that we're buying, that we're going to buy equipment that's going to last whatever the longevity of the equipment is. So that's already been discussed, and it's just a matter of when this is going to get purchased and the timing of that, I think, is really kind of the thing that Vertex is trying to work out with the vendor.
I think it's important that you have in the contract, what the minimum, availability of parts is in addition to warranty and stuff. I was engaged in real-time and embedded business. So, we sold computers into nuclear power plants and military systems and stuff, that keeps running. And in that environment, we were required to guarantee that we'd be able to maintain stuff for up to 30 years. And we're talking high-tech, computers and such. That's well outside what you want to do in this case, but you want to at least be explicit and have them on the hook for some fixed period of time, not just it's the latest and the greatest and sure it'll be good.
So, go ahead.
Does it occur to anyone else that we're having a discussion that if Vertex were here,
Yes.
they could really fill us in? We're all
Yes.
kind of guessing around
Yes.
what's really at the heart of this meeting?
Well, that's Paul, Clerk of Works,
Yes,
but
well,
in
yeah.
fairness to Paul, what John has told me is they are done with work, and they have something they're ready to go with. I'm happy to have him come in front of us again next month and explain and answer these questions, if that makes sense, or we can appoint a liaison of the committee to work with them and present back. I'm indifferent to how we.
I would just as soon hear from the horse's mouth.
Okay. All right. So, building signage. So let me tee that up, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff. So, the reason I put this on the agenda, and then you'll see 2 items in your packet. The one item that looks like a plan is actually what the planning board has approved for the submission. The second is the actual sign that is out in front of the current facility. It continues to come up of standardizing town signage. Why aren't we using the same sign that's at the existing facility? So what I asked Jeff to do, and personally I think the existing sign is great unless someone
Yeah, I
thinks
don't.
other.
I don't. I mean, my thought.
So let me just,
Yeah,
so, I don't really, while I think it looks presentable, I don't really, I just wanna know what the process is if we decide to change it, right? Cause we don't wanna reopen an entire planning
Right.
board approval process, but there are certain waivers, et cetera, so I think we should just let Jeff explain if we chose to go with a sign different than what, if we went with what's in the plans, we're done, right?
Yeah, if everybody's happy with what is on the documents and we don't want to change it, then we don't have to do anything.
Right.
But, when we were going in the middle of the planning board process and the number of hearings we had and we just wanted to be done with it, there was some discussion within the design group and certain members on the committee about should we change the sign? And what we didn't want to do is rock the boat at that time and bring us back to square one, add more hearings to the process. We just wanted to be done. So we left everything the way it was. And we said, if the committee wants to change the sign, we'll consider it during construction once we're through and out into the field. So at the time it was under discussion, as Jason pointed out, the question became, well, why don't we just do a sign that looks like some of the other signs in town?
And that was directly from planning, just,
yeah. So we looked into it. It's certainly, definitely, technically feasible to do that, of course. That's not a very difficult thing to do. However, the planning board process is a little unclear in the sense that they need to judge whether this is a significant enough alteration to our proposal that it would merit another hearing. And I guess that's the threshold that we want to find out about. Is this going to be a small enough thing that it's administrative, that we don't even have to attend the hearing, they just basically approve it pro forma? Or is it something that we have to go in, have a presentation, it opens up the whole project again to additional comments, discussion. It's of course in the middle of that driveway, which they all wanted us to change a million times, so it brings up that discussion as well, and of course we will want to carefully consider whether that's in our best interest. My understanding is that they're looking at lighting and they're looking at the size to determine whether it's a substantial enough change. And the way we're lighting our current sign is going to be different than this sign. This would have to have an exterior mounted light facing back onto the signboard because our existing sign has little lights behind it that allow the letters to glow up. And then the sign is just pretty much the same size, so the size isn't going to change much. Although I do think if we were to go with something that's already been literally the same as what they have, or something very, very similar, since it's essentially pre-approved. They've already approved it in multiple locations. I don't see why we would need to hold a hearing for it in our case.
Well, they're the ones asking for it. Let's be.
So that's sort of what we got now. They are, I think even tonight, they are gonna be discussing it in their meeting and considering what advice they would give us on that change. And we've kind of sort of sketched it out for them. It's not a proposal, it's just simply an idea. What if we did it? What would this mean? We have to go through a hearing. So we should be able to hear back as soon as tomorrow or tonight what that decision is. I will say that the existing sign isn't the greatest fit because it's not a double-sided sign. So putting it parallel to the road doesn't do anybody any good because you wouldn't see it until you're pretty much past it. So we either have to modify the existing sign or have a new one made and have it be perpendicular to the road so you could see both sides of it. We'd also want to put provisions for golf course on the sign to help direct people, whether that's something that hangs down below it or not is another scenario. But that's the situation as it currently stands. You have sort of two options. There's no decision that needs to be made tonight. It's simply just a discussion.
So just to be clear on the two options before I open it, the two options are stick with what is already approved,
Right.
or open up the conversation based on, quite honestly, some of their requests to do something similar to other town buildings to create some uniformity around town.
Sure. And like I said, if it's a new sign, you don't have to have it exactly like the existing one. You can change the language a little bit, but for the most part, it'll look similar to that.
They seemed stuck on the seal, if I remember correctly, having the seal on it.
That was an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we talk about the existing sign, I want to be clear. Are we talking about the plan as it exists, the sign as it exists in plans, or the sign as it exists on the ground at the
That
building?
one right there that you're looking at.
So the existing sign that I referred to is the picture, the photograph.
Okay.
Exactly that, yeah.
Because I remember there were issues about lighting it.
Yeah,
And one of the things that
it's-
could be lit from behind, and I'm not sure that.
Well, we proposed the lighting, the lettering of the new sign, and the proposed sign from, the backlit letters, so they would just glow. We felt that that was more appropriate, rather than just lighting up the face of the signboard, which would be actually more light, because we were trying to respond to their desire to have less light pollution, but still be a public safety facility, which you need to know where it is. Where you're gonna have exterior lights if you try to use the existing sign or something similar to that, you're gonna light up a whole big white signboard, so it's gonna be a lot more light there. Whether or not that's significant in people's minds, I guess that's a point to debate.
And then the questions, longevity and breakage and all those things that, okay.
So Mr. Rooney.
So I'm somewhat passionate about this, but I suspect that I may not get much support. I think we need to do something beyond just picking up this sign and bringing it over to the new facility. The amount of time that went into this overall project, both from prior committees and then with the negotiations with St. Mark's, and then multiple town meetings and multiple discussions. To me, that effort, that's this building, the fact that we've never built a police station before in the history of the town, it really screams out for something besides taking an old sign and bringing it down and installing it at the new location. I have no problem with the size remaining the same, the design remaining the same, but I really think, at the end of the day, that this place is so special to so many people that just bringing us existing sign down and sticking on the property is somewhat insulting.
So to be clear,
Yep.
if we do nothing tonight, that is not the sign that's coming. It's this right here, which will have, Jeff can
It's a
articulate.
very different sign. It's a metal panel with metal letters, backlit, much more contemporary looking. The sign that you have at the current facility in Wyburn and other places, more traditional looking carved sign. The one that we have in the design and that's currently going to be built, unless it's changed, is a much more contemporary looking metal structure.
Well, so I guess two questions. One, this is put in here as for what reason?
So the discussion we're having today is simply that we're revisiting the original design and suggesting.
No, just see if you can answer my question. Why is this in the packet, this sign?
Because it's part of this suggestion tonight, we have a discussion about changing the sign.
So
Where did that come from?
so during the planning process, planning asked, it was multiple members asked, why the town doesn't have like a sign policy, and why there's not uniform signs
And I think
on
it
all
was because
buildings.
there's a couple of signs in town that look almost identical, so it starts to suggest a uniformity, but it's not totally uniform because we're proposing a different sign and there's
Right.
different signage on another
So,
building.
they were very focused on the lighting, where it was going, et cetera, how you may letter it for a golf club, right? I actually had to go in front of the selectmen to just raise the issue, because I'm not sure that this committee should be deciding a policy, or has even the ability to decide a policy for how other buildings, right? And I pretty much got a, thanks for letting us know, this, I guess, probably the summary that I got from that meeting. So, Jeff, and then we went back to planning, I think that was, we then had our fourth hearing, and this was what they finally approved. So the reason that this is back in here is they continue to raise it at their meetings of why there isn't a sign. I'm not sure it's, they can't reopen, but it keeps coming
But
up.
also, in fairness to them, I think during that process, we also didn't have the opportunity as a group, the committee sitting in front of me, I think, to vet out the original sign design as well as, I think I wanna make sure you guys know what you're gonna get. That's the bottom line, is I want you to make sure you know what sign you're gonna get, you're gonna like it, and everybody's gonna be happy with it once we build it. Because I think we do have an opportunity, if we wanted to change it, and I don't have a problem with that. But I just wanna make sure everyone's comfortable with either sticking with what we have, or maybe modifying it. And if we find out that the process allows us to do that in a fairly easy way, then I think it's potentially something that you may want to take advantage of. If everybody's totally happy with the current sign that we've got in the design, there's absolutely no reason to do anything at this point. And so it's only there to have this discussion.
So, so going back to my question that I asked a little while ago. As far as approved plans go, this sign here is the one that's been approved.
Approved and will be
This
built.
sign here is the one that you're suggesting
He's not
perhaps
suggesting-
substitute for it, or another one that's
Yeah,
not.
that is an example of a sign
This
that
one.
already exists. So
Okay.
it could be one that we use,
Because
not specifically that one, but one similar to that could be built and made.
Right, and
But this whole
this here,
conversation
this
could
one
be moved.
here, what is this?
That
What does
is
it
the
look
s-
like?
It's about.
This looks like a fifth grade drawing. No,
But
it's
it's a
something
small
new, is that
drawing,
what the
yeah.
sign is?
It is
Yeah.
it's a very small depiction of the sign, yeah. That is exactly what it would do.
It's gonna raise letters with LED behind it.
It sits on posts high up off the ground, so there's snow or whatever on the ground, you can still see the sign, and has backlit letters, so that there's a glow behind the letter itself that lights up the back side of it, so that you can see the letters.
Where's that? Is there a picture of it, or?
It doesn't exist. It's a design, 4A sign that doesn't exist yet.
What's it made,
So
what do you think it's
What's
gonna
it
be
made out of?
It's a metal panel. It's similar to the cornice that's on our building, which is, on the fire station side, the apparatus bay side that has the.
And do the
Cornice
letters
on it.
light up, or does the back light up?
The letter has a hollow piece behind it, and there's LED lights behind the letter itself, and so the lights shine back against the surface behind it. So at night, you see the letter silhouette against the light behind it, so you can read individual letters.
Well, again, maybe this is just a matter of aesthetics, but the two chiefs are gonna be living in this building more so than anyone else. To me, this sign looks very, very simple. Looks like a simple sign. It really, to me, does not represent the magnanimous building that we're building and the adventure that it took to get there. Again, that's from where I come from. I'm sure it's not objectionable because there's not much there to object to, but again, I think something a little bit more maybe representative of the building as built and the journey to get there. That's where I come out, but again, I may be alone in that regard, and I just think it's important.
So Jeff, do you have an example of another towns that built it like this?
That built like the one we have in our design?
Yeah.
Well,
Is Weston's minus the brick?
Weston's similar, but it does
Yeah.
not have the backlit letters. You could imagine that at night as if the letters, behind the letters glowed up.
Yeah, that's, to me, is pretty bad.
Can I volunteer?
I remember you're the guy who said, I don't care about
Yeah,
it.
oh.
Far away.
Can I volunteer?
Yes.
This one here that I saved in my
You
phone.
had a good one, right?
Yeah, so it's basically the same idea and shape of this, but it has the class and lettering of what's down at the highway department. And just as my own personal taste, but that's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's, to me, there you go.
It's got the 2 granite posts just like that one, it's the same size, and it just takes the idea that it's on the
Distinctive,
highway.
it's
You
distinctive.
can paint it green,
No,
you
that's
know
what
what the
that-
letters
that's
in it.
distinctive.
Yeah.
I move that we go with the chief's.
So you can put whatever you want on it, you can put the town seal instead of the badge.
To me,
That's a great sign.
yeah.
What's not to like?
And I guess you just put a spotlight on the ground, you know, I don't know if
That's
you're
gonna
gonna
be the
bother
issue.
down there, there's nobody there, but,
Well, be careful what you say on that.
Alright, that's the one you.
But again, this could be a moot
Frogs that
discussion,
come out
if
of
he goes to planning and they say, no, this is gonna change a lot of the,
Yeah.
of everything.
Can I say what I'm gonna be designing?
Planning.
Oh, that's
yeah,
one.
it's-
I don't wanna
Same-
jeopardize
same
any time.
shape as that, but go
on
down
this
to our
over a
highway
sign.
department, theirs is green and it has the same gold.
I knew we'd be back in this, and by the way,
showed it to you
if I may,
Oh, yeah.
that sign, it's gonna be an opportunity for more controversy than one would normally think. Because it's gonna be out, it's gonna be lit, and people will either be saying, that's a great sign, that sign's awful.
Well, you're not
how
gonna
could they
please
fix it?"
everybody.
Yeah, right.
Anything,
Right.
so.
There
you know.
is a small
on
thing
both
called
sides.
cost too, that
Put the town
will
seal if you want.
factor in.
That's true.
They'll factor in, I
That other
I
side
tend
wasn't
to think
cheap
that
either,
the other
long
sign
time.
would have been probably even more expensive than that.
You think this one is more expensive than that one?
Probably.
Okay, that's good news.
I bet
We
you.
can check up the longevity of this one?
It looks like.
Yes.
Right. I thought that there was earlier on in the discussion, there was a question about how rugged this was and whether it would stand the winter and how so long it would be before lights were out, and it said, you know.
There's no discussion about how ugly it might be or anything of that nature?
South
I think that might have come up.
Yeah.
So there was a
LED
discussion,
glass.
we can go back to there was a discussion.
Okay.
At one, I don't know who was at, what meeting, it was in this building, I remember it very vividly. And there was mixed opinions, right? So let me propose this path forward. So I think we have a variety of opinions. I would be shocked if we get a unanimous vote, but I'm looking to try to get one, not tonight, at a future meeting. We will hear from planning tomorrow of what sort of process would incur if we change anything other than here. We can bring this discussion back. This is probably the last thing that's done on the project, or pretty close, right?
Pretty close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we can wait till July, I'm assuming, right?
Plenty of time.
Yeah, so we can wait till July, we can understand the process first, and then I think Jeff has got, if the process seems reasonable, doable, then I think Jeff has seen examples of signs that seem to appease
I had a
most.
sneaky suspicion that that may be the case,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And just so maybe there could be a third option presented then if we think it's a reasonable process, but we won't even go down that road if.
Well, we'll come up with a design
Yeah.
that is not exactly like that and similar to what the chief proposed and present it to you guys if we hear that this process is a doable, easier process. If we hear that, you know, that it's gonna be a hearing and a big change, then I'll look to you guys, I'll look to you, Jason, to tell me what you want me to present. at the
I'll
next
look to the other 8, but I have a very strong opinion on what we would do there.
You present, I think you presented more than one sign.
Yes, originally to this committee I presented.
No, I mean at planning, I think there was more than one sign that you had.
I think that's true.
There was an original sign and it didn't meet some of their criteria as exactly as they would like.
So it's-
So
I mean,
it
maybe
got-
we're
it got-
redoing
It got
something that's
simplified,
already
it
been
got
decided.
smaller because of those criteria, and I think that made it a little bit more like
You couldn't see the words.
a small sign with just a bunch of simple. That being said, the design was still different, definitely different, it was more contemporary looking, more clean design than what the chief was showing you and what you have existing. It was just a different design. And I had a suspicion that if pulled, that we would go more to that direction than where we are today.
Because we could have a big sign like he's speaking of in front of the flagpole.
Well, you can only
and
have
we could have a
some-
little sign up, you know,
Very-
directing people out.
You have a sign ordinance that limits your size. of the sign to a certain number of square feet. I forget the number, but you can't have it as big as you might want it. You can only have it as big as what they can allow. So it's probably not gonna be as big as that sign that he showed, but the one that you have now works. So it's not gonna be smaller than that.
Well, they're using the upper and lower of the sign, where this one here,
They just strung it out long, yeah, so.
Yeah, we have granite curbing protecting the sign, right?
We have a curb there, yeah. Yeah, I mean, whether it protect, how much it's gonna protect it, it's somebody taking it out.
Automobile insurance, right?
Well, my 2 cents for what it's worth is the later you make this decision, the less distracting it's gonna be and the less mischief other departments can make. I mean, I wouldn't worry about this until, 3 months before you open the building or
That's not
so.
distracting.
Because, I mean, even if the sign is the
Roads
only
already
thing
in
that's
place.
late on the project, why spend your time on this? And if you do it now, you know that in 2 months it's gonna come back.
I guess let's see what the process is. I'll have an agenda item to update everyone on the process and we can decide where to go from there.
Yeah.
Next meeting. So Paul, we didn't have any actually open questions for Vertex, so I don't have any other business unless anyone else does. Yeah, I would suggest just meeting once we adjourn and just go introduce yourself if you haven't met Paul already. Is there any other business anyone wants to conduct? Any comment? All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Wood. All in favor? We are adjourned.